Hello, everyone, and welcome to our UNCUT series. My name is 𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗃, and I am the CEO and founder of UNCUT Youth. So as you guys are coming in, be sure to tell us where you're joining us from, like, comment, and share this with someone. So as you're coming in, just let us know where you all are joining us from. And we just want to thank you guys for tuning in with us. So before we get started, I do want to just tell you guys a little bit about our organization. UNCUT Youth. We are a youth empowerment and mentoring organization that seeks to service youth between the ages of 10 to 17 to help them uncover their best self, unlock their fullest potential, to ultimately unleashing them into their destiny. And so we believe in tackling those issues, those social, emotional, economical, physical, emotional issues that are facing that is facing our youth on today. And that's one of the reasons why we formed the UNCUT series, to give us a platform where we can talk about any and everything. And so I'm so excited about our conversation on tonight. And all month long, we have paused to bring awareness, as well as to provide resources and tips to the mental health challenges that have been facing our youth, that's currently facing our youth. And so as we close out Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it would be appropriate to have a conversation, a live, raw conversation with a mental health therapist, that we could talk about various topics related to mental health, ultimately to achieving mental wholeness and wellness. So tonight is a conversation that I'm extremely passionate about, because now more than ever, it is urgent that we pause to just have a conversation affecting our young people, and for how we can cope. And so I'm so excited to bring on 𝗵𝗲 Stephens. Hello, how are you doing today?
Hi, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm so excited to have you with us on tonight. So before we get started, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and your platform?
Yeah, my name is Dr. 𝗵𝗲 Stephens, born and raised in the city of Alexandria, go 𝗿𝗶𝘀𝘀, home of the Titans, T.C. Williams. Uh, what can I say? Wow, this is so weird and awkward when you have to talk about yourself. Mostly, I am an educator. I love talking. I love educating people about things. I love sharing information with individuals who necessarily would not get this form of information. I'm all about being proactive instead of reactive. And I live by the motto, let's work smarter, not harder. And so those three things in regards to myself is what I bring to your platform today, in being able to share some insightful information that the kids that you work with, the teens and whomever, the families that are listening and or watching, can really take this information and put it into practice within their home, their neighborhood, their community, the schools, and more so individually.
Awesome, awesome. So we do have questions that we received from our various social media platforms. But
Mhm.
for those who are joining with us, if you didn't have an opportunity to submit a topic or conversation, that is absolutely okay. We are taking live questions on tonight. If you feel comfortable with addressing any of the questions on this platform. And so we are excited. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So our first question, Dr. Stephens, is really about, as you know, our conversation is about how we can dig deeper to achieve mental wholeness, mental wellness, and how we can navigate through life's challenges, and how we can cope to be our best self holistically. So before we get into all of the questions, can you break down for us what does mental wholeness and mental wellness means in the most simplest terms?
Yeah, I like the term mental wellness to be utilized throughout our time, because when we say mental wholeness, it's a form. It sounds as if it's a form of completion. And us as humans, we are constantly growing, learning, getting better. And so when we say wholeness, that symbolizes like a circle completing. But when we're doing things out of wellness, that means we're putting things into practice that will continually keep me healthy and not keep me sick. And so those are the two differences. And looking at how I can change my behavior. You know, a lot of times I ask my clients, and then I ask my clients, do you want to be healthy, or do you want to stay sick?
Mm-hmm.
Because looking at how mental health capacities and overall abilities, let's really look and examine how they're keeping you sick, but overall, you know, you want to be healthier. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where the wellness comes in, the wellness spectrum that is utilized within the behavioral health world as well as the medical world. Actually, that's where it came from. But now, for it to be applicable with mental health, and you'll hear me use interchangeably mental health and behavioral health. It's still the same thing. Um, but now we're able to take that wellness model and apply it to our own internal mental abilities. This is how we work towards staying healthy.
Mm, okay. Okay, I like that. I like that. I like that. So building on that conversation and how we can stay healthy. Um Looking at just our African American community. Looking at particularly my organization, we are an organization for all, but we do cater to the African American population. So, if you had to categorize the mental health challenges that are faced, particularly within the African American community, what would be within our young people? What would be, I would say, your top four, top five that you may see within our young folks?
Oh goodness, Larice, look, how much time do we have?
Take all the time you need.
I will say this. I have a great level of respect, compassion, grace, and mercy for young kids nowadays, because they do
Mm,
not have it easy. They
mhm,
do not. And the elements of what you're speaking of, uh, do they not just only have the expectation of performance, because you go to school, you're to do well, and if you don't, then something's wrong. What's wrong with you? And
mhm,
throughout all the areas I'm gonna mention, there's this question of what's wrong with you. That's why I say young kids don't have it easy nowadays, because that what's wrong with you leaves you feeling responsible for things that are out of your control, and not even your responsibility, right? So you got an area of performance that kids are expected to live up to. At times, there's no guidance, there's no insight, there's no direction. It's just, this is what you are to do, and I don't know how you're gonna do it, but just do it and get there and do it.
mhm,
Um, Although social media is a great thing that we have in regards to the connectivity, that also it supports the comparison piece that a lot of kids are dealing with inside school, in their communities, in their home, and now in their hands, their social media. And so there's
mhm,
this comparison element, and not even back in my day, because I'm an old woman, but back in my day, it was just TV that I had to compare with, or people within my classroom settings. So
right.
now there's this plethora of resources that I'm able to pull from and measure myself up against and see if I fit. And if I don't, then again, what's wrong with me? So we got performance, we have the comparison piece. uh, we also have this, I like to call it power and respect. And I know the old song, Lil Kim and DMX, Money, Power, Respect. Well, this is the behavioral health version, power and respect. At times, kids don't get that. They don't get to exercise their power. Their power is taken. and it's taken and not even known that it's being taken, right? And for an example, when to give a kid the ability to choose, that's new for parents and kids to hear now, or new for parents. What do you mean they get to choose? No, they're going to do as I say. And okay, well, how's that working for you? When I do family sessions, how's that working when you're telling your kid what to do and you're not even allowing them to exercise their power of choice? And so we have this power and respect struggle that happens. And I think we got a good taste of it during COVID, when kids and parents were at home doing everything, working and school all in one area. Well, I would hear, "Oh my God, my kids they're getting on my nerves." And I would say, "Did you ever think that maybe you're also getting on your kids' nerves?" Yeah, that level of power and respect, it's unilateral, it's one way. And
Mhm.
there's this understanding that, what do you mean kids are respected? They are. Well, let's look and see how they are. And when you start
Mhm.
peeling back those things, you really get to see, no, I haven't been respecting my kid. No, I haven't been allowing them to exercise their power
Yeah.
and voice. So we got performance, we got comparison, we have power and respect that
Mhm.
kids are drastically wanting to exercise and have. And you see these kids go through these extreme measures to get it,
Mhm.
right? And then also image, and this is different from comparison piece. Excuse me. When I say image, I'm looking at body image. I'm looking at how one's body fits within into the social norm. Um, being an overweight kid for a long period of time, and coming to a point in life where I own it and I claim this identity for myself. Yeah, then again, what's wrong with me that I'm not able to fit in the norm of everyone else, being within a normal body size, within a normal body limit, weight limit? So
Mhm.
again, still, what's wrong with me? Why am I the one that's standing out? And
Right.
then we have unaddressed mental health concerns. And that actually can cover all 5 areas. When I say unaddressed mental concerns, uh, the first time kids really do engage in any form of therapy is in school.
Mm.
Because where do we go? Guidance counsel. Well, they were called guidance counselors back in the day.
Right.
That's how
Right.
shows how old I am.
I was right about guidance counselor.
So now it's school counselors, and so now our school counselors have taken on a, a I can't even describe it, a life shifting position, so that they can offer these services and supportive care,
Mhm.
mental health care to kids. And so when kids go to school, that's more so their first experience of
Mhm.
learning about anxiety, of learning about depression, of learning about, yeah, I can go talk to someone about my insecurities. Yeah,
Mhm.
I can go talk to someone about what stress is and what's stressing me out.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love how you talked about the unaddressed mental health concerns, and I think oftentimes we see that so much. And I was actually in preparation just for this month in general. The National Alliance on Mental Health, they put out that it was about 17% of youth from the ages of 6 to 17 have experienced a mental health
Mhm.
disorder, along with having a major depressive episode, or thoughts of suicide or drug use to cope. If you can you kind of unpack some of those unaddressed mental health concerns that our school counselors first become aware of? You kind of talked about the naming it, the anxiety, depression, but can we unpack that a little bit more? Like, what are those, and from your perspective, what are our name those
Yeah,
essentially?
a baseline to start with is the insecurity. I think
Mhm.
we all, or I'm not going to say we, majority of our culture did watch Insecure, and
Right.
we saw a lot of ourselves within Insecure. And that prompted a great question. It's kind of like, well, where does anxiety come from? And defining that, it starts with insecurities. It starts with
Mhm.
me telling myself and having these negative understandings or beliefs about myself. It starts there. And
Mhm.
no one checking me at a young age, because if I'm telling myself I'm this, I'm that, or I'm not this, or I'm not that, I'm not smart enough, I don't fit in, or I have no friends. If I'm telling myself that and I'm not communicating that to the adults in my life, who's going to check me and
Mhm.
say, actually, you are smart. Actually, you do
Right.
fit in. Actually, you do have friends. Like, who's checking me? So that's number one in regards to how anxiety is developed over time, because those negative cognitions that have been started and planted at that young age, what do you think happens? Like anything else as a child, it grows with us. And still, I'm not communicating along the way, that I'm telling myself and I'm believing these negative cognitions. And
Mhm.
so then we get to be adults and we're still harboring these unspoken truths that we've told ourselves, or unrealistic truths that we told ourselves. And so now we're adults trying to navigate through this. And then it's like, oh, so this is what anxiety looks like and feels like. And this is also an extension of a source of the insecurities that was planted way
Mhm.
back when and out of my control.
Wow. Okay. 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 So looking at our anxiety, how does anxiety and depression, do those mirror? Do they walk hand in tandem? Like, talk a little bit about that, about the presence of
I get
anxiety.
excited talking about this stuff.
Talk a little bit about that.
If you think about a clock,
Mhm.
not a digital. What is it? Gosh, it's been a long day. But if you think about a clock on the wall, 12 to 12, and if I'm starting at 9 o'clock, right?
Mhm.
I'm starting at 9 o'clock, and I have anxiety, meaning I'm believing these beliefs that I'm telling myself. Now I am walking them out throughout the day in my interactions with people. If in that anxiety is going to get higher and higher and higher. So now I'm at 12 o'clock. Right. And so now anxiety is going to show up in my relationships. It's going to show up in how I interact with people. It may show up in how I perform.
Mhm.
I may be presented with a lot of self-doubt or low confidence. But
Right.
again, it's still growing and growing and growing. And so when it gets to be too much, meaning overwhelming, right? This is too
Mhm.
much that I'm unable to deal with this right now. This is when you get isolation, when individuals go into an isolative mode. And when they begin to become isolative, that means they're not engaging in pleasurable activities. They're not communicating or interacting with many people. Sleep is of concern or complicated. And then now we started at 9, got to 12. Now we're at 3 o'clock.
Mhm.
And the switch happens. We've gone from anxiety to now depression, because I've been so isolated. I haven't done anything that I enjoy doing. I'll use myself as an example. I love spin. Everybody, if they know me, they know I love spin. And if I haven't gotten to that, it's been months since I've done it. I'm now isolative. I'm not as sociable as I have been. My sleep is of concern. Yeah, now we've nicely switched over into depression, and
Mm.
it's not realized until someone says, "Yeah, girl, where you been? I ain't seen you. It's been about 3 months." What? It's been that long? Yeah. When
Yeah.
last time you rode your bike? I don't know. It's been about 2 months. Dang, you used to do it every day. What happened? Right. And so it's that observational feedback that leads us to know that, okay, something has shifted and changed. And I'm,
Mm.
I'm still I'm not putting the words to it, because again, all I know is something has shifted and changed. And so now we've gone from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, where we are in this depressive position, where our eating is off, our sleeping is off, our pleasurable interests are off, safety concerns are now of on the table.
Mhm.
Um, did I mention our weight is changing?
Mhm.
Or Yeah, our meaningful relationships. Let me add that meaningful relationships are not being maintained or kept. And then it's like, okay, yeah, something's really wrong. I don't like feeling like this. That agitation and irritability sits in. And so now we slowly come back to the 9 o'clock section of the clock. But there's this small little space, this green space where we toggle between. That green space is a space of stability, a space of calm and grounding it. Excuse me. However, if I'm not monitoring my wellness, then I can easily switch over into anxiety, and that cycle will happen again.
Over again.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it does. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. It does go hand in hand. And honestly, in doing this work, and the years I've done this work, and the research I've done, we are more anxious than we are depressed. But we mask it so well. And in a sense, anxiousness is a little bit more acceptable than depression. Depression, you stick out like a sore thumb. But if I'm anxious, then yeah, somebody say, "Oh, you just got a lot of energy." If I'm anxious, "Oh, you just like to talk a lot."
Right.
If I'm anxious, "Oh, you just can't sit still. You got to keep moving." Again, it's more it's more acceptable.
I'm letting that marinate real because I love the clock analogy. That's why it's so important to always be mindful of your mental wellness. You know, as we are faced with these things. So I want to shift just a little bit, especially with how, you know, with you talking about anxiety, being overwhelmed, the isolation, as well as the depression, especially with the recent heart-wrenching events that our nation has been experiencing, you know, Buffalo as well as in Texas. What kind of conversations do you think we should be having amongst ourselves, and how do we cope? You know, this whole conversation is all about, you know, learning how to navigate through life's challenges and how to cope, but especially with something so traumatic as that. What conversations should we, as parents, guardians, community leaders, should be having, especially as a whole, but then more so with our children that we encounter on a day-to-day basis?
You know, going back to, and that's a great question, and I have been hearing that question being circulated a lot within the news media. The first thing, going back to what I had mentioned about power and respect, and making that applicable to kids, and being inclusive of children. Children have a level of power that they are wanting to exercise and develop a healthy sense of power. And then they also want to be respected. We want our kids to grow up and understand what it is that they deserve versus things that they don't deserve. Well, allowing them to practice and exercise their own individual respect, levels of respect, is how we get the outcome that we want. And so I start off with that because that's where the conversations come in. If I'm feeling this way, then I definitely need to be checking in with my kid, because I know probably 9 times out of 10, my kid is feeling this way. You know, I think back in the day, and I'm no parent, I don't pretend to be a parent. I love kids and I love working with kids. However, I think back in the day, there was this out of sight, out of mind, don't say anything mentality that parents had. If something tragic or traumatic happened, don't tell the kids. You send the kids out into another room while the adults handle and talk or converse about whatever trauma has occurred. Well, again, problem number one, yes, adults need to process and get their game plan together. But also, problem number one, you've left out the most important people that this involves, which are the children. And so going back, if I'm feeling like this, I know most likely it's a high probability my kid is feeling like this. Going back to what I said, what's the first source of kids experiencing any forms of counseling or therapy? In schools, right? And so again, with that, there's a level of education in allowing kids to have that information accessible to them. Now, I'm not saying sit your kid down in front of the TV and let them watch the news,
Mhm.
all day, every day. However, if it's not mentioned in the home, I guarantee you, your kid already knows
Mm.
because they've learned about it through social media or they've learned about it through going to school. And so, technically, parents are the last to know of what their kids know. So when
Mm.
we overlook those things, this is how it becomes there's this gap that happens between parents, guardians, caregivers, the identified parent, whomever it is, and kids really having a united front and really, what's the word I'm looking for? Creating, uh, there's no splitting that happens. Yes, I can understand why kids don't want their parents to know everything that they do. However, when it comes to safety, protection, education, respect, and power,
Mm.
we have to have a unified front.
I like that.
Mhm.
Like that. And so to keep building on that, as you were talking, the first thing that I thought of was environmental stressors. So how does these types of environmental stressors impact our children's wellness? Because if, just by watching it on the news or, being in some, traumatic experiences with the young people that I've mentored over the years, some of their encounters have been very traumatic. So how does these types of experiences or environmental stressors really impact them and can affect their mental stability?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the environmental wellness piece because I did a panel discussion with someone that was focusing strictly on the environment
Mm.
and how that is impacting our mental health. Well, when we look at the environment and environmental pieces, we have to focus on the social determinants that are driving the behaviors that we're seeing. It's unfortunate of what has happened in Texas. It's unfortunate of what has happened in New York. But those are the situations and the scenarios that have made it to a platform that has alerted the nation.
Mm. Mhm.
And they, of course, are still figuring out what determinants drove these individuals to create such heinous acts. However, we have situations on a smaller scale, which is our day to day, our neighborhoods, that don't get that level of attention and awareness, nation awareness. And we still have to determine what are the social determinants that are driving the behaviors that we're seeing of our kids. You know, I learned of, I'm not saying I learned of recently, but knowing that there are food deserts and food deserts here, even in the DMV area. I'm like, what? How
Mhm.
how can you say there's a food desert when there's a food place everywhere? And it's
Right.
no, Lenise, look, where's the nearest grocery store? Where do
Mhm.
people really have to go to choose from in support of eating whole grains and fruits and vegetables and have a healthy eating or healthy lifestyle? So
Right.
that
Right.
right there is a factor that I don't have access to. Then yeah, I'm going to gravitate towards, okay, what is it that I have available? Because now it's not a want. Now I'm just focusing on what it is I need, and I'm operating out of survival mode. So
Mm.
when we have factors like that shift that wellness mentality or wellness process to now operating out of survival mode, this is where we get a lot of those the health concerns, the overweight, obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol. Okay, if all those are going on, then yeah, what else is this impacting?
Mm.
Operating out of survival mode. Okay, it's clearly doing something to my mental abilities.
Absolutely. 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 And I read in an article from the American Psychology Association, and in this article, they released that there is a high stress and ineffective coping mechanisms that are ingrained in our culture. And when I read that, I was like, so does it mean we don't know how to cope when we deal with not just traumatic experiences, but when we deal with when life gets the best of us? Or sometimes when we have a bad day, or when we're anxious about something, or we're worried, and it begins to alter our mental wellness. So for a moment, can you talk about some of the appropriate strategies for managing and coping with things that are common to our young people, such as the anxiety, the stress, and the depression?
Yeah, and this is a good thing to transition to talking about, because we do. I'm not going to take all of our power away from us. We do have the ability to cope, because we have, right. We've it's kind of like this is what I've been given, so I'm gonna exercise and utilize it, because this has been a source of a positive source of outcomes for me.
Right.
So coping is ingrained in us. And I'm just going to, that article you read, just give you a little bit of insight about that article. It's in our DNA to negativistically view the world, okay, or situations. I
Mhm.
would say we never walk into a room and say what's right. If we're just flat affect, well, what's wrong? That's ingrained in us. It's in our DNA. And so there's I'm not gonna say there's no way of separating it. However, we do have ways to alleviate it. And that goes back to evolutionary times, where you're out there and you're using your senses to not be preyed upon, but
Mhm.
to secure prey so that you can eat, right? Or to hunt. And
Right.
so, given that means this is where the flight and fight stress hormones come in, cortisol. Because if I'm in danger, I got to get the heck out of there. Or if I'm realizing that, yes, I'm able to secure something that my family can eat off of, then no, I don't need to be stressed. Well, over time, again, that has developed with us. Hence
Mhm.
why we are such a high stress society, because we do not know how to turn on and off those cortisol hormones. And
Mhm.
so it's not a matter of that we don't know how to cope. We do. It's just that at times what we have been normed to may not be working so much for us now, today. And so this is where you get the addition of mindfulness practices. It's not saying that what you've been doing is wrong. It's saying, okay, you got a good source. Let's add to it.
Right.
Let's
Right.
let's make it a little bit more stronger, so you don't have to turn to cigarettes to cope with whatever stress, or you don't have to turn to emotional eating to cope with whatever is discomforting to you. So
Mhm.
having I always I let people know, you make it sound like that's the only option for you,
Mhm.
because again, that's what we've been normed to. And so I'm all about, okay, you can have that, but can we also add to it?
Mm.
There's plenty of space to add to how we cope.
Mhm. So how would you teach a young person to cope, especially if with everything that has been going on? Um, how would you teach them to cope if they don't feel safe, going into the places where they have that first encounter with the school
Mhm.
counselor? Or so essentially, how can they cope, or how do they feel safe from a coping standpoint?
Mhm.
How can youth cope in those types of situations, when they may not feel safe to even be in those harmful situations, or let's just say even a school? What are some ways that we, parents, guardians, mentors, can emotionally and mentally like support their needs to help them
Mhm.
cope in a more effective way?
Yeah. It's Maurice, do you exercise?
Yes, all the time.
And again, it's a method to my madness. I promise. I
Okay.
promise. With exercise comes with modifications, right?
Absolutely.
I cannot do a push. I do the girl push-ups, and I'm okay with that, right? Because I'm modifying it because I want to protect my back, my knees, my shoulders, but I'm still able to do this with the group, right?
Right. Right.
That can be transferred over into life.
Mm.
We call those boundaries,
Mm.
making modifications to where I can still protect myself, but I'm also able to still move with the group. And so with that element, keeping that in mind, I'm able to make modifications to protect myself, but still be with the group and move along with the group. Also, just being, if I had $1 for every time I heard of how can I, or how do we, or how this, I tell you, I will be a millionaire, probably a billionaire. And I would share it. Trust and believe, I would definitely share it. Um, but I let individuals know just being is how.
Mm.
Meaning, whatever is coming up right there in that moment, identifying it. We stay so much up here in our heads, it's not even funny. Even doctors, and if they say they don't, they lying. And you could tell them, Dr. Steven says you're not being truthful. We stay up here a lot, and so at times when we do come down here, it does feel a little awkward and weird, and it feels like we've just let go of our defense mechanisms, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, both can exist. I can make a modification and still be with the group, move along with the group.
Mm.
Both can exist. So
Mm.
I can still create what it is that I need to, I can be on an alert, or I can be aware. Um, and I can pay attention to what's coming up for me so I can know how to respond.
Mm. I like that. I like that. So I'm gonna shift just a little bit, um, because a part of this is not just how to cope, when to achieve mental wellness, but it's also to kind of talk about the very um, present stigma of mental health, and the misconception, I believe, about what mental health looks like. So can you talk about what does that look like, and in your opinion, do you think the stigma of mental health has been lifted?
No. If anything, the pandemic has really put behavioral health on the platform. If
Mm.
you didn't believe in it before 2019, 2020, you daggone sure believe in it now because it became real for everybody. And it became real for those who have a plethora of resources, an abundance of resources, right? It
Mhm.
became real for people on that level, as well as real for people who did not have an abundance of resources to cope. And
Mhm.
so that right there lets you know that behavioral health definitely has been put on the map. Therapists were the number one sought after providers during COVID.
Mhm.
One, right? And so kudos for us. But at the same
Absolutely.
time, it's like, okay, it takes for a pandemic to happen for people to understand the wellness pieces of your mental health. So I say, yes, we have grown, and yes, some of the stigmas are beginning to change.
Mhm.
However, we still have a long way to go. And
Mhm.
I say that because I said the no piece because uh, therapy is popularized now. It's I don't want to say it's the buzz thing or the hot thing to do, but it is the trending thing to do. And so when you see things like that, it's like, okay, it's like with any fad weight loss program that's through. It's like, okay, this is something new. Let me try this to get the outcome or the changes that I'm wanting.
Mhm.
Similar on the lines there, where it's a very trending and it's a trending topic. However, I always like to make sure people are getting what it is that they're needing from therapy. Meaning, what are you noticing that's changed in your life now that you have been working with a therapist. How is your quality of living?
Mm.
Are those things that used to bother you, are they still bothering you?
Mm.
And so having those measures versus the statement, yeah, I'm going to my therapist. Okay, that's good.
Right. Absolutely.
Talk to me about how things have changed. How have you put those tools that you've learned in the room into practice outside of the room?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, do you feel, since we are um, talking about mental health, and definitely before we go any further, I do have to shout out mental health clinicians, therapists. You guys, you have a very strong and heavy task because you essentially get everybody's stuff. You get the weight of everybody's, problems, where they are, where they're not, where they're trying to go. And so my hat does go off to you all as well. So one of the things that came up in a conversation with some folks is, do our young people really have these safe spaces where they can share their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, and be their true selves? So talk a little bit about that. If therapy is not an option for a young person, do you feel like they have these spaces? Do we as people create these spaces for our young people to really share?
I like I said in the beginning, my hat goes off to teenagers and adolescents growing up nowadays, because it's a lot of things. It's harder for
Absolutely.
kids, and if my elders heard that, what do they have? What is so hard? They go to school, come home, and watch TV and eat, and everything is a for. Yeah, that's just the bit. That's the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm Virginia by heart, Delray, Northern Virginia, Alexandria by heart. Love it, love it, love it. But being in Maryland, I've noticed polar opposite experiences where in Northern Virginia there were a lot of outlets. In every neighborhood, you had a rec center. In every neighborhood, you had community programs going on at this rec center. In
Right.
every neighborhood, you knew the rec center officials by
Mm-hmm.
first name, and they knew you, and they knew where you lived, and they knew if things were going awry, they would call and go past your house and talk to your parents and let your parents know. Being here in Maryland, it's not so much that not so much access like where from whence I've come from. And so when you're looking around, it's like, well, where's the rec centers? I don't see anything where kids can congregate and just be themselves, and to develop those social skills that we want them to have,
Mm-hmm.
develop those interpersonal relationships that we want them to have, get a different perspective of life outside of just the mama and daddy or the primary caregivers in the home or what they see on TV. And so to go from one area to this area where that it's far and few in between, I do look at it as a disservice because kids don't have that outlet. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you do have programs like UNCUT or different mentoring programs, it's but so much that one can do, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think during an era in the mm, about 10, 15 years ago where there was a slow process of programs being developed and created. They weren't rolling out as quickly as they were. And I didn't dive deeper into figuring out what that was about, but it dried up. And
Mm.
so now you're starting to see an emergence and an upswell in a lot of supportive groups, not just for adults, but mostly for kids now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I hope I've answered your question in a sense, because we have to look at, okay, what is available for our kids?
Mm-hmm.
Sports, okay, yes. But what else is available for them that will still give them that space where they can just be? They're not performing in sports or whatever extracurricular activity, but just being, for them to develop their own identity.
I like that. I like that. And oftentimes, that's why in developing and creating UNCUT, I wanted, my vision for UNCUT was to create these safe spaces and these, places where, it's a judgment-free zone. So if you're coming in with a completely bad day, hey, let's give it to me. This is this environment is your safe space. And I agree, oftentimes, we don't have enough safe spaces where we can just say, you know what, you don't have to perform. You don't have to try to do this, this, and this. You can just simply be. And whatever being is for you in this moment, we are going to receive that and accommodate that. And so with every discussion as we close, I love to provide resources and tips that parents as well as youth can begin to adopt in the home. So as we begin to transition into our final piece, what are some effective methods for managing mental health in the home, particularly, with both the parents and the children? And I ask this question because sometimes what I've seen is that there may be mental health problems in the home, but that are not within the children. So how can we effectively manage the mental health of our children if we are struggling with mental health ourselves?
Yeah.
So first, what are some effective ways that we can begin to adopt in the home for managing, our youth's mental health?
Yeah. When we say manage, it's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna make this pile. This, you ever had what is it, a junk pile? It's like, okay, I'm just gonna make this look real nice and neat, even though it's a junk pile. But I'm gonna manage it. I'm gonna make sure it doesn't get any bigger. My stuff doesn't go anywhere. So if we're looking at wellness, the spectrum of wellness, it's not about managing. It's about sorting through and realizing what needs to be changed. And the biggest piece about mental health, Louise, is having to come to terms with understanding if I'm amenable to the changes that I want for myself. That's one. Am I in a space to mentally, emotionally, and physically to do what is needed to advance the changes that I want, or to change whatever is happening within the home? So that's one piece. But when we have caregivers or the identified parent who may be dealing with their own or grappling with their own mental health concerns, this is where I need some eyes outside of the house. Where's the number one place where kids go and people find, or they feel safe to share what's happening? School. And so that is a source, even though it's looked at as what goes on in this house stays in this house, you don't tell anybody, but actually that's a cry for help. And so having that and utilizing that, again, going back to power and respect, kids don't reprimand or penalize a kid for having a cry for help. I know what's happening in here. It may not be affecting my kid, but my kid is not comfortable with what's happening in our home. Right? And so a kid is going to operate out of survival mode and look for, it's like we call it a blue baby moment. When a baby turns blue, you're taking it to the hospital. That means something's wrong, right?
Right.
Kids have those moments. They can have blue baby moments where they're looking for anyone to help them with whatever circumstances. So you need an extra set of eyes outside of the house. The basic abilities to ensure that wellness is remained at the forefront, we have to look at how we're sleeping. And I mean sleep, not sleeping, but sleeping. Meaning, is this restful sleep that kids in the family is getting? Do we have a nighttime routine? Whereas though everyone has a morning routine, we get up, wash our face, brush our teeth, take a shower, get dressed, eat breakfast, and go to work or go to school, right? That same routine can be beneficial to help with closing out the day. I ask individuals, difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep? And it's difficult falling asleep. Yeah, so tell me, what's the routine? What's the nighttime hygiene routine to help your body ease into a restful sleep? Well, I really don't have one. I said, it doesn't involve your phone. Well, yeah, absolutely. problem number one. Your mind is still stimulated, but your body's like, oh, I'm tired. We need to go to sleep. But still scrolling, still texting, still calling. And so there's no opportunities for the balance to happen. If it's going to be a part of the morning, then it's required at the end of the day. So that's one thing, looking at how we're sleeping. Also, what is it that we're eating? Are we being filled up on a lot of sugar content? Does our diet consist of fruits and vegetables and water? Are we a one meal a day family? We call those OMADs, 1 meal a day people. Or do I snack or I graze all day? So looking at how am I treating my wellness? Again, do you want to be sick or do you want to be healthier?
I like that. I like that. So just a few more questions. What are some behaviors that parents should particularly tune into to help track their children's behavior, to make sure that there's not a mental disorder or a mental challenge brewing in their child? So what are some things that they should pay attention to within their children?
Communication. And when again, working with families, I ask, when is there family time just to talk? Not at the dinner table. I mean, at the dinner table is one, but when is there opportunities to talk and share questions that you may have? Again, how does insecurities begin and anxieties grow? No one's checking what I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
So when is there an opportunity? If I'm not going to tell you, then that leaves, I need you to ask me. Right? Because I'm a firm believer, kids will tell you if you ask them. If you ask the right question, they're going to tell you what the answer, and it's an accurate representation of how they're feeling and thinking, right?
I love that.
So if that exchange is not happening, then yeah, we've missed the opportunity to alleviate any suffering that kids are placing on themselves. So there's so many ways that we can be here all night, but for me, it boils down to communication. It boils down to, when you communicate, that I'm also observing you. And when I'm observing you and communicating with you, also that is removal of judgment. Because keep in mind, a lot of what these kids do nowadays, their parents are like, never would I ever.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so when giving that observational feedback or inquiring about something, approaching it from a non-judgmental stance. Again, going back to power and respect.
Absolutely. I think, kids will tell you whatever they want based on your approach.
Yes.
And your approach, your tone, your posture, and that's why a lot of one of my mentees, she's like, Miss Louise, I can tell you anything, because I'm just gonna tell me, I'm all ears, versus if I come off like, what you do, it's going to restrict them. They're going to feel like restricted, not to communicate and not to share. So I love how you put that communication, observing, and being mindful of that exchange, because it does help remove the judgment. So just one final question. Can you list some methods, since this conversation has been about achieving mental wellness and keeping that as the forefront? Can you list some of the methods for strengthening mental health support systems from a long-term standpoint, for improving our child's lives?
Yeah. Do this with me. Go ahead, sit up straight in your chair, touch your shoulders, and I want you taking a deep breath. Ready? 1, 2, 3. And exhale. And let's take in one more. And exhale. Tell me, what came up for you right then and there? What are you feeling? What are you noticing?
Present, a
Mm-hmm.
moment, a stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to be still and you got to be present.
Mm-hmm. You know, again, you talk about anxiety and when to clear it out. Just take a deep breath. It's going to clear out all this, kind of like the clouds. It's going to go poof. It's going to blow away. Because then you'd be like, what was I just thinking about?
Right.
What did I need to do? Oh, right. But we don't do that. We forget to breathe. We forget to breathe. And I always ask people, when's the last time you breathed? And it's so interesting and funny when I ask it, they're like, you know what? You're right. I don't know. Yeah. So I can see how the anxiety is now is driving your day. Because there's no moments for you to breathe. That's one thing. Really, really being in tune with your breath. And like you just said, the stillness piece. Number two, there's no way around it. We have to exercise. We have to. And for adolescents, that is a relationship that is required to be developed and enhanced throughout their developmental years. There's no way around it. We talk about wellness. We talk about warding off a lot of the ailments that can come mentally, physically, emotionally. We have to move our bodies. And if you really want to go further, having that supportive group network, go join an exercise class. That becomes your family now. You know more people. It's not just me going to the gym and exercising. No, right. I know Sally, Sue, I know Joe, I know Mary. Oh, this is an extension of my family. Not just my blood family. This is my chosen family.
Right.
So again, there's no way around it. So those are the two things that I can, and again, the communication and the observation and having no judgment when talking to kids, conversing with kids.
I love that. I love, incorporating. I found something about the rainbow breathing that I was going to put out because I think oftentimes, we just need to sit down and have that moment of stillness to, just to breathe. And even, when I was looking about anxiety and stress, it was coming back to this center space of just breathing, taking the deep breaths in and the deep breaths out. So I thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
For saying yes to, just to share your knowledge with us on tonight. And so I'm sure folks are wondering, where can they find, more information about you, your practice, and what do you specifically cater to if they wanted to seek your services?
Yeah, so hopefulcounseling.org is the website, and Hopeful Counseling is my practice. And right now, of course, we do mental health, individual and family and couples therapy, dealing with individuals who are dealing with anxiety, depression, the gamut of some mental health concerns. Also, the psychoeducational piece is really starting to be built up. I know that I've been in the works with creating different groups that I want to offer young women, also men. But again, my practice tends to cater towards majority African-American women, but it's open for everyone. So there's a lot of psychoeducational groups that are going to be coming out. And one has been started. We do a lot of work, not just in the individual and family and couples counseling, but I also do a lot of work with the bariatric population, the weight loss population, people who have undergone surgeries to have weight loss, working with some surgeons in the DMV area so that the behavioral health piece is added to having this type of surgery, because there's so many people who don't know how to change their relationship with food. And so they have this surgery, which is a life-changing situation, but they haven't changed the one thing that is needed to drive the surgery. So that's one area. We do a lot of work with loss and grief, where I will be doing some holiday support groups around the time, or just ongoing grief groups. It's lots of things are coming in the works. It's I like to tell people whenever I'm quiet, just know that something's cooking in the lab. So now we're in a space where we're ready to kind of emerge. Actually, not kind of. We're ready to emerge and broadcast this. So on Twitter, not Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram, Hopeful Counseling, LLC. HopefulCounseling.org is the website, and yeah, that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. And I can't speak for our viewers or those that will watch the replay and go back, but this has definitely been a fruitful conversation
Yes.
for me in an effort to achieve mental wellness. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate you.
You are welcome. And Laurice, thank you so much for doing what it is that you're doing for our youth. You've created another safe space for them. And I know that they are highly appreciative of this. So thank you for stepping up. Like they say, many are called, but chosen are few.
Yes.
And I'm grateful to have you to be a part of the chosen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're
Well, folks, there you have it. We could go on all night, but we're going to bring it to a close. But we just want to thank you guys for tuning in to our discussion on digging deeper and how to navigate through life's challenges to achieve mental wellness. So thank you all, and check us out next month. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.